Hey, thank you so much for joining my YouTube channel. We are beginning a brand new series, but I want to ask this question. What are you going to do this summer? What do you like to do in the summer? We're like on the cusp of summer. So, are you planning a vacation? Are you planning to go paddleboarding? Do you, ugh, if you live in Florida and you have those no-see-ums, I hate those things. And you're like, what is a no-see-um? These little tiny, you can't see them, little bugs, and they like eat at you. So if you're in Florida, I hope you have a lanai so you don't have to get eaten up by no-see-ums. You're like, oh my gosh, that is a rabbit trail. But we're talking about after Easter. I don't know about you, but after Easter, I start thinking summer. So what are you going to do after Easter? That's what this series is all about, after Easter. And so, as you think about after Easter, after Jesus rose from the dead, what are some of the things that happened? And not only with Jesus, but also with us. So, I was thinking about this, and I love reading about what happens in Luke chapter 24. And this is after Jesus has risen from the dead, and he's appearing these like little cameo appearances. You're like, he pops up in random places, like, whoop, there's Jesus, and whoop, and the disciples weren't expecting. Disciples weren't expecting the pop up Jesus. So these two disciples were walking on a road, and they were going to Emmaus. And as they were walking on the road, again, they don't have like jet little ski, not jet skis, but they don't have like motorcycles or scooters or ski boards. They don't have any of that. They're just walking. That's the basic transportation at this time in history, just walking. Well, we need to get to Emmaus, so we'll just take a walk. However long it takes, it will just take a walk and we'll get there eventually. So these two disciples are walking, and they're walking to Emmaus, and as they're walking, this dude joins them. And at this time in history, it wasn't uncommon for fellow travelers to connect on the road. And it's kind of similar to us. If we're traveling, sometimes we like to meet somebody new, and some people don't. They put their headphones on a plane and a little eye covers, and they're like all insulated in. They don't want to talk to anybody and have anybody talk to them. But that's not how it played out here. Because in this situation, these two disciples walking, this dude joins them, and they started having a conversation. And they were talking before the guy joined them. They were talking about all the things that had just happened in Jerusalem. Jesus was crucified. The Jewish leaders were really amped up. Then they demonstrated all their power by killing Jesus. And then now his body's missing. And the disciples are saying he's been risen from the dead, resurrection. And so these two disciples are talking about all this stuff as the dude joins them. And he comes up and he's listening to their conversation. And he says, what are you guys talking about? And they turn to him and they're like, haven't you heard? Like, where have you been? Did you have your head in the sand for the last week? You don't have any clue what's going on. And like, what is your problem? And so they tell him, this is, they give that little rundown again. Jesus crucified, blah, blah, blah. And then the guy who's with him starts to talk about the Old Testament. And he starts talking about, the prophets in the Old Testament and how they prophesied the coming Messiah, and how the Messiah would be demonstrated, would do these various signs and events and go through these experiences prophesied in the Old Testament. And this conversation between the two disciples and this dude happens over the course probably of at least an hour, 2 hours, couple hours. And as they're walking, the dude is explaining the Old Testament and those prophecies and how they relate to the Messiah to these two disciples. And as they're walking along, these two disciples are like, whoa, wow, that's really, I never thought of it that way. Oh, oh, that's amazing, kind of blows their mind. So then he joins them and they have dinner and they invite him. Hey, have dinner with us. And the dude sits down, has dinner, and it says he breaks the bread. And when he breaks the bread, it says their eyes were opened. And the dude was Jesus. And he disappeared in that moment. And those two disciples were like, oh, that was Jesus walking with us. Holy buckets. He was walking with us. And then it says, did not our hearts burn within us? Holy heartburn. Oh my goodness, blew their mind. Joke break. Hold on a second. Joke break. We've got to interrupt with a commercial break for a joke. So, if a parsley farmer gets sued, can they garnish his wages? So bad. Now, let's get back to something encouraging and more uplifting. And I love that this relates to us because a lot of times Jesus is walking with us in our journey in life and we don't recognize him. There are times he's walking with us and we're like, oh, and a lot of times we'll recognize Jesus in the rear view mirror. We look back on a situation, we're like, oh yeah, now I can see Jesus' fingerprints. He was doing this, he was involved here, he said this, he organized this person I met, he put this situation. And we can see Jesus participating in our lives in hindsight, but not always in the present, in the moment. And I'm bringing this to your attention because I want us to be aware that Jesus is always with us, whether we recognize him or not, whether we feel him or not, whether we see him, whether we hear him. But Jesus is always with us. He never leaves us and he never forsakes us. So after Easter, one of the first things that's most important is that we always are aware Jesus is with us regardless of where we're walking, the road to Emmaus or what we're going through. Jesus is always with us. And as we think about after Easter, we're also going to talk about some doubting. That's what we're talking on the next episode is doubting. So what happens when you have some discouragement, some experiences that compromise your faith, that increase your doubt? What do you do with that? That's what we're going to talk about next.